Imagine you are standing in your bedroom at midnight. It is a quiet, almost mundane observation to note that your first instinct, the moment you realize you've forgotten your phone in the kitchen, is to reach for the light switch. You don't even think about it. You just want the darkness to go away. That tiny, mechanical click is the sound of 300,000 years of evolutionary terror being silenced by a copper wire. It's a paradox, really, that we spend a third of our lives in a state of vulnerability that should have, by all logic of the natural world, resulted in our extinction long ago. You are a slow, soft-skinned primate with mediocre hearing and a sense of smell that wouldn't impress a house cat. For 99% of your history, the moment the sun dipped below the horizon, you didn't just lose your vision, you lost your status as the top of the food chain. So, why didn't the night kill us? How did a creature that is fundamentally blind in the dark manage to not only survive the most dangerous half of the day but actually use it to become the most dominant force on the planet? The answer isn't that we just hid and waited for the morning. The truth is that what we did during the night is the very reason we became human in the first place. But before we get into the fire and the stories, we have to dismantle a very comfortable lie. Most people have this mental image of a caveman huddled in the back of a damp cavern, shivering in the pitch black while a saber-toothed cat prowls outside. It's a classic trope, but it's mostly nonsense. For one thing, caves were often the most dangerous place you could possibly be. Large predators like the cave hyena, which was about twice the size of a modern spotted hyena, lived in those caves. If you went into a deep cave without a plan, you weren't finding a home. You were walking into a larder. Early humans didn't just stumble into the dark and hope for the best. They engineered the night. Which, incidentally, is something we're still doing today with our LED screens and streetlights. The reality of prehistoric night was a sophisticated, high-stakes game of biological management. We didn't just sleep. We practiced a form of collective vigilance so effective that it basically broke the rules of nature. Why didn't this kill you? That is the question that drove Dr. David Sampson, a biological anthropologist at the University of Toronto. In 2017, he published a study that fundamentally changed how we look at the ancient night. He spent over 200 hours monitoring the sleep patterns of the Hadza people in Tanzania, a group of modern hunter-gatherers whose lifestyle provides the closest possible analog to our Pleistocene ancestors. What he found was staggering. Out of those 200 hours of group sleep, there were only 18 minutes, total, where every single person was asleep at the same time. On average, at any given moment during the night, 8 people were wide awake. This is what researchers now call the sentinel hypothesis. We didn't evolve to sleep like logs for 8 hours. We evolved to have chronotypes, natural variations in our internal clocks. The teenagers and young adults stayed up late, guarding the periphery. The elders woke up at 4 in the morning to tend the embers. This wasn't a choice, it was a survival mechanism hardwired into our DNA. You don't have insomnia, you're just a sentinel who was born in the wrong millennium. But even with sentinels, the night was a time of immense physical risk. During the day, you can see a leopard from 100 yards away. At night, a leopard can see you, but you are effectively a statue. To understand why we didn't just become leopard snacks, we have to look at the chemistry of the night. About 400,000 years ago, humans began to master fire. Now, we usually talk about fire in terms of cooking or warmth, but the most radical thing fire did was create a circadian niche. It wasn't just a light source, it was a weapon of mass psychological warfare against the animal kingdom. Most large cats hunt by using the contrast of low light to ambush prey. Fire destroys that contrast. It creates a circle of aggressive light that confuses a predator's visual processing. By sitting around a fire, ancient humans weren't just staying warm, they were creating a physical barrier out of photons. This leads us to the work of Polly Wiesner, an anthropologist who spent 40 years studying the Jews/Hoansi of the Kalahari. She noticed something that had been completely overlooked by history. She analyzed 174 separate conversations across both day and night and found that the content of human speech changes based on the position of the sun. During the day, roughly 80% of conversation was work talk. Who is gathering what, where the tubers are, how to fix a spear. It was logistics. But at night, the firelight changed our brains. Which is a polite way of saying it made us weirdly creative. Nighttime conversation was 81% stories. We didn't talk about the hunt, we talked about the ghost of the hunt. We talked about ancestors, about the stars, about the why of the world. The night became the laboratory for the human imagination. If the day was for the body, the night was for the soul. Without those hours of sitting in the dark, forced to communicate because there was nothing else to do, we likely never would have developed complex language or religion. However, even with stories and sentinels, our bodies were doing something else entirely. We have this modern obsession with 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. We think if we wake up at 2 a.m. and can't get back to sleep for an hour, we have a medical disorder. But as historian Roger Akirch pointed out in his landmark study, Sleep We Have Lost, this monophasic sleep is a total historical fluke. Until the invention of the light bulb, humans practiced biphasic sleep. You would go to sleep shortly after dusk for your first sleep. You'd sleep for about 4 hours and then, around midnight, you would just wake up. You weren't panicked. You weren't stressed. You were in a state of what researchers call quiet wakefulness. During this time, the body produces high levels of prolactin, a hormone that induces a state of calm, meditative clarity. In the Middle Ages, this was the time for prayer, for checking on the livestock, or for visiting neighbors. Ancient humans likely used this middle-of-the-night window to tend the fire and share the most intimate parts of their lives. Ironically, we now spend this precious biological window scrolling through TikTok and wondering why we feel anxious. The deeper you go into the archaeology of the night, the more you realize how much we engineered our rest. In 2020, archaeologist Lynn Wadley discovered something incredible at Border Cave in South Africa. She found the remains of beds that were 200,000 years old. These weren't just piles of grass. These were sophisticated multi-layered platforms. The base layer was made of ash from old fires. But because ash is a natural repellent for crawling insects like ticks and bedbugs. On top of that, they layered broad-leafed grasses, specifically Cymbopogon, more commonly known as lemongrass. Even 200 millennia ago, we were using chemistry to ensure a good night's sleep. We were using the leftovers of our defense, the fire ash, to create a sanitary zone for our rest. This suggests that the ancient night wasn't a chaotic scramble for survival. It was a structured, managed environment. And yet, there's an even bigger mystery hiding in our eyes. If we are so bad at seeing in the dark, why didn't we just evolve better night vision? Why are we the only great ape that doesn't have a tapetum lucidum, the reflective layer in the eye that makes a cat's eyes glow in the dark? This brings us to a mind-bending piece of evolutionary history called the nocturnal bottleneck, which is a fancy way of saying we are the descendants of the ultimate night shift workers. For millions of years, during the age of the dinosaurs, our mammal ancestors were exclusively nocturnal. They had to be, or they would have been eaten by a T-Rex. We spent 65 million years in the dark. We evolved incredible hearing, a sense of touch through whiskers, and a massive brain to process all that non-visual information. But when the dinosaurs died out and we moved into the daylight, we traded our night vision for something else. Color. You can't have both. High-resolution color vision requires a high density of cone cells, which don't work in the dark. We gave up the night so we could see the ripeness of a fruit in the day. This trade-off is the single most important event in our history. By giving up our biological night vision, we forced ourselves to become social. A creature that can see in the dark can survive alone. A creature that is blind in the dark must have friends. The ancient night was the forge of human cooperation. You stayed near the fire because you had to. You talked to the people around you because you had to. You trusted the sentinel to stay awake because your life literally depended on it. We didn't just survive the night. We used the night to invent the concept of us. But let's get into the big reveal of this investigation, the thing that most historians and biologists are only just beginning to grasp. For a long time, we assumed that ancient humans were essentially just day people who were trying to survive the night. But the evidence suggests the opposite might be true. We might actually be night people who have been forced to live in the day. Think about your brain's activity. When does insight usually happen? When do you have your most profound thoughts? For most people, it's in the quiet, low-stimulation hours of the late evening. This isn't a coincidence. During the day, our brains are in processing mode, handling the massive influx of visual data, social cues, and physical tasks. But the moment the lights go down, the brain shifts into integration mode. This is when we make connections between disparate ideas. This is when the stories happen. Ancient humans didn't just tell stories to pass the time. They told them because the nighttime brain is physiologically wired for narrative. If you look at the movements of ancient peoples, you see the night everywhere. The Polynesian navigators, for instance, could read the ocean like a map, but they did their most precise work at night. They didn't just look at the stars, they looked at the voids between the stars. Understood the rising of certain constellations as a clock that told them exactly when the currents would shift. They weren't just traveling through the dark, they were using the dark as a high-precision GPS. Or look at the San people of the Kalahari, who have a specific word for the feeling of the night. They don't see the night as a lack of light, they see it as a presence that allows for a different kind of truth. They believe that during the day, you can lie, but around the campfire, the light is too honest for deception. Which makes you wonder what our modern society would look like if we still did our most important business around a flickering flame instead of under fluorescent office lights. The sheer technicality of ancient nighttime survival is also something we often underestimate. Take the Inuit, who lived through months of total darkness during the Arctic winter. They didn't just hibernate. They developed a culture of intense indoor sociality, complex craftsmanship, and a mythology that is arguably the most rich and terrifying on Earth. They mastered the art of the seal oil lamp, which provided just enough light to work but not enough to ruin their dark adaptation. They lived in a state of perpetual sentinel awareness. They understood that the night wasn't an enemy to be defeated, but a landscape to be navigated. Which brings us back to the most terrifying part of the ancient night, the predators. We often think of lions and leopards as the primary threats, but there was something else out there in the Pleistocene night. Dinofelis. It was a genus of false, saber-toothed cats that was specifically adapted to hunt primates. They were heavily built, powerful climbers, and, most importantly, they were specialized for killing in the dark. Their teeth weren't the long, fragile sabers of the Smilodon. They were shorter, stouter, and designed to crush the skulls of early hominids. When you look at the skull of a Paranthropus, an early human relative, with two neat holes in the top that perfectly match the canine spread of a Dinofelis, you are looking at the reason we fear the dark. We are the survivors of a million-year-long war against a specialist night killer. And we won that war not with claws, but with a piece of glowing wood and a story. Think about that the next time you feel that prickle of unease when you walk into a dark room. That isn't paranoia. That is a very old, very accurate memory of a creature that no longer exists, but which shaped every single neuron in your brain. By the way, if you're enjoying this deep dive into our prehistoric shadows, you might want to consider joining us for more. We're constantly digging into the why behind our weirdest human traits, and having you along for the ride helps us keep the fire burning. No pressure, though, we're just glad you're here. So, what did ancient humans do during the night? They did everything that makes us who we are. They slept in shifts to protect each other, showing the first signs of organized altruism. They built sophisticated, insect-repellent beds that showed the first signs of applied science. They talked for hours about things they couldn't see, showing the first signs of abstract thought. They woke up in the middle of the night to reflect and pray, showing the first signs of spiritual consciousness. And they stayed close to the fire, showing the first signs of the social bond that would eventually build cities and empires. The night wasn't a gap in history. It was the catalyst. It was the pressure cooker that took a standard-issue primate and turned it into a storyteller. We are the children of the campfire. We are the sentinels. We are the biphasic sleepers who have been forced into a 9 to 5 world that our biology doesn't understand. Our modern world has tried to colonize the night with electricity, but the ancient night is still there, just beneath the surface. You can feel it when you wake up at 3 a.m. for no reason. You can feel it when you find yourself staring into a candle flame, lost in thought. You can feel it in the way a story told in the dark feels more real than anything you see on a screen during the day. We often talk about the dawn of civilization as if it happened when we started farming or building walls. But civilization didn't start with a plow. It started with the first group of humans who decided that the night was too beautiful to spend in terror. It started when one person looked at the fire and another person started to speak. We didn't defeat the darkness. We made it our own. We transformed the most dangerous time of the day into the most sacred time of the day. The paradox of the human eye is that it is designed for the day, but the human mind is designed for the night. We need the light to see the world, but we need the dark to see ourselves. Without those thousands of generations spent huddled together, listening to the crackle of the wood and the distant roar of a cat that wanted to eat us, we wouldn't have the capacity for empathy, for art, or for wonder. The ancient night wasn't something we merely survived. It was the womb of the human spirit. Now, let's look at the science of the transition. The reason the campfire was so effective wasn't just the light, it was the smoke. We've recently discovered that the smell of wood smoke has a profound effect on human neurochemistry. It triggers the release of oxytocin, the bonding hormone. When ancient humans sat around the fire, they weren't just looking at each other, they were literally, chemically, fusing as a group. The scent of the night fire was the signal to the brain that it was safe to drop the daytime defenses and engage in social bonding. This is why, even today, the smell of a campfire feels so right to almost everyone. It's an olfactory shortcut to a sense of safety that is hundreds of thousands of years old. And then there's the moon. We forget, in our world of light pollution, how powerful the moon was. A full moon provides enough light for a human to travel, to gather, and even to hunt. But it also provides enough light for predators to see us. Studies of modern lions have shown that they are most dangerous to humans during the week after a full moon, when the moon rises late and the early evening is pitch black. Ancient humans knew this. They lived by a lunar calendar long before they ever thought of a solar one. They knew when to be hypervigilant and when they could afford to be social. They weren't just passive victims of the cycle of day and night, they were master chronobiologists. Which brings us back to that mundane observation from the beginning. You are standing in your bedroom. You reach for the light switch. You click it, and the room is flooded with light. But for a split second before that light arrives, you are standing in the dark. In that tiny fragment of time, your heart rate spikes just a little bit. Your pupils dilate to their maximum. Your hearing sharpens, filtering for the sound of a snapping twig or a heavy breath. You think you're just a modern person in a comfortable house, but in that second of darkness, you are 300,000 years old. You are a sentinel. You are a storyteller. You are a survivor of the Dinophelus. You are a creature of the firelight, waiting for the first word of a story to break the silence. The night has never left us. It is still there, in the way we dream, in the way we love, and in the way we still, after all this time, fear the things we cannot see. We didn't survive the night by making it go away. We survived it by turning the darkness into a mirror. Think about that the next time you wake up in those quiet, clear-headed hours of the middle night. Don't reach for the light. Don't reach for the phone. Just sit there for a moment in the dark. Listen to the house. Listen to your own breath. You aren't awake when you should be asleep. You are simply participating in the most ancient human tradition there is. You are occupying the watch. You are being exactly what your ancestors needed you to be. The truth is, we don't just live in the night, we are defined by it. Every story we've ever told, every god we've ever worshipped, and every why we've ever asked was born in that circle of firelight. We are the only creature on this planet that decided that being blind in the dark wasn't a weakness, but an opportunity to see things that don't exist. We are the masters of the shadow, the keepers of the flame, and the children of the sentinel. And as you finally drift back to sleep, remember that the darkness isn't an absence. It's a presence. It's a landscape that we have spent 300,000 years mapping, one campfire at a time. The night is yours. It always has been. It's just that now we've forgotten how to see it. But let's return to that physical detail, that mundane moment when your hand finds the light switch. You click it. The room vanishes into blackness. And as your eyes struggle to adjust, you realize the chilling truth. That feeling of being watched from the corner of the room isn't a glitch in your modern brain. It is the definitive closing argument of your entire evolutionary history. That prickle on your neck is the ghost of a predator that spent 1,000,000 years learning how to kill you in this exact silence. You reach for the light not because you're bored, but because you are the descendant of the people who didn't get eaten. You are the product of a 300,000-year-old winning streak, and the only reason you are here to click that switch is that your ancestors knew exactly what was waiting for them in the dark. They knew it, they feared it, and they stayed awake for you. The darkness hasn't changed. Only our ability to ignore it has. Sleep well. If you can.